The flames licked at the wooden stagecoach as Jillian Valmont clutched her mother's brooch to her chest, the smoke filling her lungs faster than her screams could escape. Terror seized her heart as the fire roared around her, transforming her journey to a new life in Silver Creek into what would surely be her tomb. Through the crackling inferno and billowing smoke, she thought she glimpsed a silhouette on horseback, a mirage, perhaps, conjured by her desperate mind in its final moments. The year was 1876, and the unforgiving landscapes of the Arizona Territory had claimed countless lives before hers. Jillian had left Boston with dreams of teaching at the newly established schoolhouse in Silver Creek, carrying little more than books, clothes, and determination. The stagecoach journey had been arduous but uneventful until the bandits appeared on the horizon just after sunrise that morning. Their attack had been swift and merciless. The driver and shotgun guard were the first to fall to their bullets. The other passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling salesman, had surrendered their valuables without resistance before being ordered out of the coach. But Jillian had refused to part with her mother's brooch, the only memento she had of the woman who'd passed 2 winters ago. "I'll burn the whole thing down with you inside it," the leader of the bandits had threatened when she'd hidden the piece inside her bodice. And true to his word, after dragging her back into the coach, he doused the vehicle with kerosene and struck a match. Now, as the flames consumed the roof and walls around her, Jillian found herself bound to the seat, abandoned to die over a trinket worth perhaps $10 but holding infinite value to her heart. The smoke stung her eyes, forcing them shut as she struggled against the ropes that bit into her wrists. Her lungs burned with each desperate breath. This was it, she thought. 22 years of life, ending in fire and alone. Then came the thunder of hooves, cutting through the roar of the flames. A crack of gunfire. A man's voice, deep and commanding, "Hold on!" The door of the stagecoach was wrenched open, sending a rush of fresh air and flames surging inward. Through her tears and the smoke, Jillian saw him tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat, a bandana pulled up over his nose and mouth. "Please," she managed to gasp. Without hesitation, he plunged into the burning coach, the flames catching at his coat sleeves as he reached for her. His knife flashed, severing the ropes at her wrists. Strong arms encircled her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. "Close your eyes and hold your breath," he ordered, his voice muffled by the bandana. Jillian obeyed, burying her face against his chest as he turned and charged through the wall of fire. The heat intensified momentarily, a scorching, all-consuming wave, and then they were outside, the man staggering but maintaining his hold on her as he carried her away from the inferno. She felt herself being placed gently on the ground, cool grass against her skin. When she opened her eyes, she found herself staring up at the clearest blue sky she'd ever seen, then at the face of her rescuer as he pulled down his bandana. His eyes were the same shade as that sky, set in a weathered face that spoke of years under the sun. A thin scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into several days' worth of stubble. He couldn't have been more than 30. "You're safe now, madam," he said, his voice gentler than she'd expected. "Can you breathe all right?" Jillian nodded, though her throat felt raw and each breath sent pain shooting through her chest. She began, but was interrupted by a fit of coughing. "Samuel Vance," he replied, offering her a canteen. "Sheriff of Silver Creek. Drink slowly." She took the canteen with trembling hands and sipped at the water, which soothed her parched throat. "Jillian Valmont," she managed. "I was coming to teach at our school," he finished for her. "Mayor Jenkins telegraphed about your arrival." His expression darkened. "I've been tracking the Wallace gang for 3 days. Didn't expect to find them attacking the stage." Jillian's gaze drifted to the burning coach, now little more than a skeleton of blackened wood and metal. "The other passengers, they're safe," Sheriff Vance assured her. About a mile back down the trail. The gang forced them to walk after taking their valuables. He frowned. Why did they leave you behind? Her hand instinctively moved to her bodice where the brooch remained hidden. I wouldn't give them my mother's brooch. Their leader said he'd make an example of me. Samuel's jaw tightened, and his eyes flashed with anger. James Wallace. He's done this before, using fear to control people. He glanced around, scanning the horizon. We need to move. The rest of his gang scattered when I rode in, but they won't go far. As if to confirm his words, a rifle shot rang out, kicking up dirt just yards from where they sat. Samuel reacted instantly, throwing himself over Jillian and rolling them both behind a large boulder. Stay down, he ordered, drawing his revolver and peering cautiously around the edge of their shelter. 2 more shots ricocheted off the rock. Samuel returned fire twice before ducking back. 3 of them, maybe 4, he muttered. They're trying to circle around. Jillian's heart pounded in her chest. She'd never been shot at before today, had never even seen a gun fired outside of holiday celebrations in Boston. What do we do? She whispered. Samuel checked his ammunition. My horse spooked when the shooting started, but he won't go far. If we can make it to him, we might outrun them. Jillian nodded, gathering her courage. Just tell me what to do. Their opportunity came moments later when the bandits paused in their shooting, likely repositioning. Samuel grabbed Jillian's hand. Now, he said, pulling her to her feet. Run for those trees. They sprinted across the open ground, Samuel half dragging her along. More shots exploded behind them, one whizzing so close to Jillian's ear that she felt the air disturbed by its passing. Then they were among the trees, continuing to run until Samuel gave a sharp whistle. To Jillian's amazement, a magnificent chestnut stallion trotted toward them from deeper in the woods. Samuel helped her mount, then swung up behind her. Hold tight, he instructed, spurring the horse forward. They rode hard for nearly an hour, following game trails and crossing streams to throw off any pursuit. Jillian, who had never ridden astride before, found herself pressed against Samuel's chest, his arms around her as he held the reins. Despite their dire circumstances, she couldn't help noticing the solid warmth of him, the way his breath stirred her hair. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Samuel slowed their pace. I think we've lost them for now, he said, his voice close to her ear. Are you all right? Jillian realized she was trembling, whether from fear, exhaustion, or the lingering effects of smoke inhalation. She couldn't say. I'm alive thanks to you, she replied. How did you know to come? That I was in the coach. I didn't, Samuel admitted. I was tracking Wallace when I saw the smoke. By the time I realized what they'd done. His arms tightened almost imperceptibly around her. I thought I might be too late. You weren't, she said softly. You saved my life. They rode in silence for a while longer, until they came to a small clearing beside a creek. Samuel dismounted first, then reached up to help Jillian down. Her legs buckled as soon as her feet touched the ground, and he caught her, his hands strong at her waist. Easy, he murmured. You've been through quite an ordeal. Jillian looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. So have you. Your coat, Samuel glanced down at his singed sleeves. It's seen worse. You could have been killed, riding into that fire. He shrugged, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Wouldn't be much of a sheriff if I let bandits burn innocent women alive in my territory. As he busied himself setting up a small camp, Jillian took the opportunity to truly look at her rescuer. Samuel Vance moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to handling himself in dangerous situations. Yet there was a gentleness to him too, evident in the way he'd cared for her and now in how he treated his horse, speaking to the animal in low, soothing tones as he removed the saddle. "It'll be dark soon," he said, gathering wood for a fire. "We'll stay here tonight and reach Silver Creek by midday tomorrow." He paused, glancing at her torn and soot-stained dress. "I'm sorry I don't have any spare clothes to offer you. I'm not concerned about my appearance at the moment," Jillian said with a small smile. "Though I suppose I'll make quite the first impression on the townsfolk." Samuel chuckled. "They're good people. They'll be too happy to finally have a teacher to worry about a little soot." As night fell, they sat beside the small fire Samuel had built, sharing the jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. The flames cast dancing shadows across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the thoughtful set of his eyes. "Have you been sheriff long?" Jillian asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. 3 years, he replied. "Before that, I rode with the Texas Rangers for a spell, then scouted for the Army during the war. And before that?" A shadow crossed his face. "I was a rancher's son. Had a small spread near El Paso with my father and younger brother." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Raiders hit us when I was 20. I was in town that day. Came back to find everything burned. My family gone." "I'm sorry," Jillian said softly. "I know something of loss myself. My parents both passed within a year of each other. That's partly why I came west. There was nothing left for me in Boston." Samuel studied her across the flames. "It takes courage to leave everything you know behind." "Or desperation," she countered. "Sometimes they're the same thing." They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Jillian told him of her dream to establish a proper school in the West, where children of all backgrounds could receive an education. Samuel spoke of his desire to see Silver Creek grow into a place where people could live without fear. When Jillian finally drifted off to sleep, wrapped in Samuel's coat despite his protests that he didn't need it, it was with the strange sense that she'd known this man far longer than a single day. She woke at dawn to find Samuel already awake, scanning the horizon with a concerned expression. "What is it?" she asked, rising to her feet. "Smoke," he said, pointing to a thin, dark line rising in the distance, coming from the direction of Silver Creek. They broke camp quickly, and soon were riding hard toward the town. As they crested a ridge overlooking the valley, Jillian gasped at the sight below. Several buildings on the outskirts of Silver Creek were ablaze, and even from this distance, they could see figures moving about, some fighting the fires, others engaged in what appeared to be gunfire. "Wallace," Samuel growled. "He must have ridden straight here after we escaped. Why would he attack the whole town?" Jillian asked, horrified. Samuel's expression was grim. "Because of me. Because I've been trying to bring him to justice for months." He urged his horse forward. "I need to get down there." "I'm coming with you," Jillian stated firmly. "It's too dangerous." "I'm not staying here alone," she interrupted. "And you can't spare the time to take me somewhere else." After a moment's hesitation, Samuel nodded. "Stay close to me. If I tell you to run, you run. Understand?" They approached the town cautiously, using the cover of the surrounding hills. As they drew closer, the sounds of shouting and gunfire grew louder. Samuel led them to a small ranch house on the outskirts that had been spared from the violence. An older woman came out onto the porch, rifle in hand, as they approached. "Samuel Vance, is that you?" "Thank the Lord." "Mrs. Henderson," Samuel greeted her, dismounting. "What's the situation in town?" "Wallace and his boys rode in about an hour ago, shooting up the place, setting fires. Mayor Jenkins and some of the men are holding them off from the bank, but they're outgunned." Her sharp eyes turned to Jillian. "Who's this?" "Jillian Valmont." She was meant to be your new schoolteacher, Samuel replied. Mrs. Henderson, can she stay here while I go into town? Before the woman could answer, Jillian slid down from the horse. I can help. I may not know how to shoot, but I can tend to the wounded. Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. Girls got spirit. Come inside, both of you. My Henry and the boys are in town fighting, but I've got extra guns and ammunition. Inside the modest home, Samuel quickly checked and loaded a Winchester rifle, while Mrs. Henderson found a pair of trousers and a shirt that might fit Jillian. My daughter's, she explained. She's off in California now, married to a banker. These will be more practical than that ruined dress if you're set on helping. Jillian changed quickly in a side room, emerging to find Samuel watching her with an unreadable expression. The clothes were a bit large, but with the sleeves rolled up and the pants tucked into her boots, she felt surprisingly comfortable and far more prepared to face whatever awaited them in town. You sure about this? Samuel asked quietly. I've never been more certain of anything, she replied. They left Mrs. Henderson to guard her home and rode together toward the center of town. As they approached Main Street, Samuel pulled his horse into an alley between the general store and the blacksmith's shop. Wallace and his men are holed up in the saloon, he said, nodding toward a large building across the street. Looks like the townspeople have them pinned down, but they can't get close enough to end this. Jillian followed his gaze. Several bodies lay in the street. She couldn't tell from this distance whether they were townspeople or bandits. What's your plan? There's a back entrance to the saloon through the kitchen, Samuel said. If I can get in that way, I might be able to take them by surprise. That's suicide, Jillian protested. There must be at least 6 of them in there. Samuel's eyes met hers. I've faced worse odds. Let me create a distraction, she suggested suddenly. Draw their attention to the front while you slip in the back. Absolutely not. I won't put myself in danger, she insisted. But I could. I could pretend to surrender. Tell them I have the brooch they wanted. It might give you the moment you need. Samuel studied her face, conflict evident in his eyes. You're either the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I've ever met. Perhaps a bit of both, she admitted with a small smile. After further discussion and against Samuel's better judgment, they formed a plan. Jillian would approach the front of the saloon under a flag of truce, or in this case, her white petticoat tied to a stick. She would offer to trade the brooch for the town's safety, keeping the bandits' attention while Samuel entered through the rear. If anything goes wrong, anything at all, you get out of there, Samuel instructed her, his hand gripping her arm with urgency. Promise me. I promise, Jillian said, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and determination. They parted ways at the alley, Samuel moving to circle around behind the buildings, while Jillian walked openly toward the mayor and several armed townsmen who were taking cover behind overturned wagons. Miss Valmont? A balding man in a waistcoat exclaimed when she approached. We thought you were dead. The passengers from the stage arrived on foot and told us what happened. I was rescued by Sheriff Vance, she explained quickly. He's here, and we have a plan to end this standoff. But I need you to hold your fire when I approach the saloon. The mayor looked skeptical but nodded. What do you need us to do? Be ready to move in when you hear Sheriff Vance's signal 3 quick shots. With the townsmen briefed, Jillian took a deep breath and stepped out into the street, her makeshift white flag held high. James Wallace, she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. I want to speak with you. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the saloon's batwing doors parted, and a tall man with a shock of red hair and a cruel smile stepped halfway out, a pistol held loosely in his hand. Well, he drawled. If it ain't the lady teacher who wouldn't part with her trinket. You should be ashes by now. I have a proposition for you, Jillian replied. taking a few steps closer but remaining out of reach. "I'll give you what you want, my mother's brooch, if you and your men leave this town in peace." Wallace laughed. "And why would I do that when I'm about to own this whole town anyway? Because my brooch contains something far more valuable than you realize," Jillian improvised. "There's a map hidden inside it to a gold mine in the Superstition Mountains." This caught Wallace's attention, just as she'd hoped. "Show me," he demanded. Jillian reached slowly into her bodice and withdrew the brooch. It was a simple piece silver with a small pearl at its center, but she held it as if it contained all the treasures of the world. "Come and see for yourself," she said, extending her hand slightly. "But only you. Tell your men to stay inside." Wallace hesitated, clearly weighing the risk against his greed. Finally, he stepped fully through the doors. "This better not be a trick, schoolmarm." As he approached, Jillian forced herself not to retreat, though every instinct screamed at her to run. She prayed that Samuel had made it into position by now. Wallace was just 3 feet away when the first shot rang out from inside the saloon, followed quickly by 2 more the signal. The bandit leader spun around, momentarily forgetting Jillian. It was all the opening she needed. She lunged forward, driving her knee up with all her might, catching Wallace in a spot her proper Boston upbringing had never taught her to target. The outlaw doubled over with a howl of pain, his gun clattering to the ground. Jillian kicked it away just as the townsmen rushed forward from their positions. Inside the saloon, chaos had erupted. Samuel had managed to surprise the bandits, shooting one and disarming another before they knew what was happening. The remaining men scrambled for cover, but with their leader neutralized and the townspeople now pouring in through the front doors, the fight quickly turned against them. When the dust settled, James Wallace and his remaining gang members were being led away in handcuffs, while the town's doctor tended to the wounded. Miraculously, none of the townspeople had been killed in the raid, though several had suffered injuries. Samuel found Jillian sitting on the steps of the saloon, clutching her brooch and staring out at the aftermath of the battle. He sat down beside her, wincing slightly as he favored his left side. "You're hurt," she observed, immediately concerned. "Just a graze," he assured her. "Doc already looked at it. I've had much worse." He nodded toward the brooch in her hand. "So, where exactly is this gold mine of yours?" Jillian laughed, the sound bright and unexpected amidst the smoky remains of the day's violence. "I'm afraid that was a slight embellishment on my part." "Slight?" Samuel raised an eyebrow, but his eyes sparkled with amusement. "You had Wallace convinced. For a moment there, you even had me wondering." "It was just something my mother always said," Jillian explained, turning the brooch over in her hands. "That true wealth isn't in gold or silver, but in the heart." She opened the brooch to reveal a tiny painted portrait inside a woman with Jillian's same blue eyes and gentle smile. This was all I had left of her. I couldn't bear to lose it. Samuel's hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. "You were incredible today. Foolhardy, like I said, but incredible." "We make a good team," she replied softly. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The town came together to repair the damage from Wallace's raid, while simultaneously preparing the schoolhouse for Jillian's arrival. News came that the infamous outlaw and his gang would be transported to Yuma prison, effectively ending their reign of terror in the territory. Jillian threw herself into helping with the recovery efforts, getting to know the townspeople who would soon be entrusting their children to her care. And each evening, she found herself in Samuel's company, whether sharing a meal at the hotel restaurant or simply walking along the town's quiet streets as the desert sunset painted the sky in impossible colors. On the eve of her first day of teaching, Samuel invited her to dinner at his small house on the edge of town. He'd clearly gone to great lengths to prepare. The table was set with an actual tablecloth, and delicious smells wafted from the kitchen. "I didn't know sheriffs could cook," Jillian teased as he served a remarkably tender venison stew. "This one can," Samuel replied with a smile, "though I don't get much chance to prove it. Usually just cooking for myself." After dinner, they sat on his porch, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. The night was cool but pleasant, with the scent of sage on the breeze. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Samuel asked. Jillian considered the question. "Not nervous exactly. Excited. I've been preparing for this my whole life, it seems. The children are fortunate to have you," he said. "This town is fortunate." She turned to look at him, finding his gaze already on her. "Samuel," she began, then hesitated. "I've been meaning to ask. That day with the stagecoach, why did you do it? Ride into the flames like that? You didn't know me." For a long moment he was silent, his eyes searching hers as if deciding how much to reveal. "When I saw that burning coach," he finally said, "I thought of my family's ranch, of coming home to find everything in ashes." His voice grew softer. "I couldn't save them, but maybe I could save you." Jillian reached out, her fingers lightly touching the scar along his jaw. "You did save me, in more ways than one." Samuel caught her hand in his, turning it to place a gentle kiss against her palm. "Jillian Valmont, I believe you might have saved me right back." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more needful. When they finally drew apart, both slightly breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I know it's too soon," he murmured. "We've known each other barely a week. But I feel as though I've been waiting for you my whole life." "Sometimes," Jillian said, echoing his words from that first night by the campfire, "a week can feel like a lifetime." The months that followed were the happiest of Jillian's life. She threw herself into teaching, transforming the one-room schoolhouse into a place of learning and discovery for children who had previously had little formal education. Samuel continued his duties as sheriff, though the capture of the Wallace gang had brought a new era of peace to Silver Creek. They courted properly, under the watchful but approving eyes of the townspeople. Sunday dinners at the hotel, walks after church, chaperoned picnics with some of Jillian's students and their families. Yet there was nothing conventional about their courtship. How could there be, when it had begun with fire and gunsmoke? As winter settled over the territory, bringing cooler temperatures but little snow to their corner of Arizona, Samuel took Jillian riding one crisp Saturday morning. They followed a trail up into the hills overlooking the town, finally stopping at a clearing with a magnificent view of the valley below. "I used to come up here when I first became sheriff," Samuel said as they dismounted, "when the weight of the badge felt too heavy, or when I doubted I could make a difference." "And now?" Jillian asked, taking his offered hand as they walked to the edge of the clearing. "Now I come here to think about the future," he replied. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Our future, if you'll have me." Jillian's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Samuel," he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I had this made in Tucson," he said, opening it to reveal a ring. The design was unusual, a delicate silver band with a small pearl, reminiscent of her mother's brooch. "I thought, well, I hoped you might like to wear this alongside your mother's piece, as a reminder that while we can't change the past, we can build something beautiful from it." Tears filled Jillian's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man before her. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Samuel Vance, the steadfast sheriff who had ridden through flames to save a woman he didn't know, suddenly looked uncharacteristically nervous. "Jillian Valmont, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder, her voice ringing out across the valley. Yes! He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into an embrace that lifted her feet off the ground. When he set her down, his kiss was a promise of protection, of partnership, of passion that would never fade. They were married in the spring, with the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Henderson's daughter returned from California to serve as Jillian's maid of honor, while Mayor Jenkins stood as Samuel's best man. The school children formed a choir, singing hymns as Jillian walked down the aisle of the newly built church, her mother's brooch pinned proudly at her throat. In the years that followed, Silver Creek continued to grow and prosper. Samuel remained sheriff, though he eventually trained a deputy to handle most of the day-to-day duties as law and order became more firmly established. Jillian's school expanded to 2 rooms, then 3, as more families settled in the area. They built a home on the edge of town larger than Samuel's original cabin but still modest, with a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. It was on that porch, 2 years after their wedding, that Jillian told Samuel she was expecting their first child. "A boy or a girl?" he asked, his hand gently cradling her still flat stomach. "We won't know until they arrive," she laughed. "Either way," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion, "they'll be raised with stories of their brave mother who faced down outlaws and walked into danger to save a town. And their father," Jillian added, "who rode through fire to save a woman he'd never met, simply because it was the right thing to do." Their daughter, Clara, was born that winter a healthy, strong-lunged girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. She was followed 2 years later by her brother Robert, and 3 years after that by the twins Elizabeth and William. The stagecoach route eventually gave way to the railroad, and automobiles began to appear even in their remote corner of Arizona. The wild frontier gradually became less wild, though Samuel always maintained that true civilization wasn't about technology but about how people treated one another. On their 20th anniversary, Samuel took Jillian back to the clearing where he had proposed. A picnic blanket was spread beneath the same oak tree, now taller and broader than it had been that day. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked as they shared a bottle of wine, their children grown or nearly so, their life together rich with memories both bitter and sweet. "How different things might have been if I hadn't seen the smoke that day, if I'd been just a few minutes later." Jillian shook her head, reaching up to touch his face, now lined with the evidence of years spent squinting against the desert sun. The scar along his jaw had faded but never disappeared completely. "I prefer to think about what did happen. How you came charging in like some hero from a storybook, risking your life for a stranger." "Best risk I ever took," Samuel said, pressing a kiss to her palm just as he had done that night on his porch so many years ago. "Do you know," Jillian mused, "that day on the stagecoach, when I thought I was going to die, my biggest regret was that I hadn't really lived yet. I hadn't known love or adventure or the satisfaction of building something meaningful." She smiled at him, her eyes still as bright and determined as they had been at 22. "You gave me all of that, Samuel Vance. A life worth living, worth fighting for. And you gave me a reason to keep fighting," he replied. "To believe that even in the darkest moments, something beautiful can emerge from the ashes." As the sun set over Silver Creek, painting the sky in shades of flame and gold, Samuel and Jillian Vance sat hand in hand. Their love story begun in fire and desperation, now a steady, enduring flame that would continue to light their way forward, together.